I never thought I'd end up here, laying out the wreckage of my life on the internet. But hey, when your world gets flipped upside down, you do whatever it takes to keep your head on straight. My name's James. 6 years of marriage to Lucy. No kids yet. Just the two of us trying to make it work like any other couple. Or so I thought. It all started with my fitness tracker. I bought one of those wearable gadgets as part of my New Year's Get My Life Together resolution. It tracked everything: steps, heart rate, sleep, pretty cool stuff. Lucy, ever the competitive one, insisted on syncing her tracker to my app so we could compare our stats. She had this thing lately about staying active: morning yoga, evening strolls, lunchtime walks. I figured, why not? A week later, I noticed something odd. Monday afternoon, her step count went through the roof between noon and 3, hours when she was supposed to be at work. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe she had a busy day, running errands or pacing while on phone calls. People do that, right? But then it happened again on Tuesday, and Wednesday, and Thursday. Each day, Lucy clocked thousands of steps during what should have been a quiet afternoon at her desk. Curious, I asked her about it. Hey Lucy, noticed you've been racking up steps during work hours. Getting your fitness in during meetings? She laughed it off without missing a beat. Oh yeah, I've been taking long walks during lunch to clear my head. Helps with creativity. Her answer was smooth, but something didn't sit right. Lucy always had this way of turning on the charm when she needed to wiggle out of a tight spot. Like the time I found a $300 charge at some boutique and she spun it as investing in quality shoes that'll last forever. I wanted to trust her, but a little voice in my head wouldn't shut up. The next week, when her step count skyrocketed again, I decided to dig a little deeper. I called her office on my lunch break just to see if her story checked out. Her receptionist, Kathy, answered the phone. Lucy? Oh, she's not here right now. She usually steps out around this time. Can I leave her a message? That was the first time my stomach dropped. I hung up without saying a word, telling myself there had to be an explanation. Then came the picture. One night, Lucy went to shower, leaving her phone charging on the counter. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe I was just tired of feeling like something wasn't adding up. I picked up her phone, opened the Photos app, and there it was. A picture of Lucy, sitting in a cozy cafe I didn't recognize, smiling at a guy I didn't know. He had this casual, confident look about him, leaning in like they'd known each other forever. It wasn't an office meeting. It wasn't brainstorming. It was intimate. I locked her phone and put it back before she came out of the shower. My heart was pounding so hard I thought she'd hear it. I didn't confront her. Not yet. If she could lie to my face about lunch walks, what would stop her from lying about this? That night, lying in bed next to her, I couldn't sleep. All I could see was the image of her with that guy, laughing like she didn't have a care in the world. And me? I was stuck trying to figure out when my wife had become a stranger. The picture burned a hole in my brain for days. Lucy didn't act any different, but that was the thing about her. She was smooth. She'd always been good at keeping her cool, even when she was full of crap. I decided I needed answers. Not just vague suspicions, but something solid. The step counts were still climbing during her work hours, and that photo wasn't just going to fade from my memory. So, the next Friday, I took a personal day. Lucy left for work as usual. Sharp blazer, her go-to heels, and a quick kiss goodbye like nothing was wrong. As soon as her car was out of sight, I grabbed my keys and followed. Her office was about 15 minutes away, but she didn't head there. Instead, she drove toward the older part of town, where narrow streets wove through neighborhoods full of coffee shops and craft stores. I kept my distance, heart pounding as I tailed her like I was in some low-budget spy movie. She parked on a side street and walked toward a small cafe with big bay windows and a charming, rustic sign out front. I stayed in my car, watching as she went inside. 10 minutes later, the same guy from the photo showed up. He looked exactly like I remembered. Dark hair, perfectly groomed, wearing one of those casual yet expensive outfits that screamed, "I don't work a real job." He greeted her with a hug. A little too close, a little too long, and they sat by the window. I could see them laughing, leaning toward each other. He touched her hand across the table. She didn't pull away. My throat tightened, and for a second, I wanted to storm in and flip the damn table over. But instead, I stayed put, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I snapped a few photos with my phone, my hands shaking the whole time. This was real. No more guessing, no more wondering if I was overreacting. When they finally left, they didn't part ways. She walked with him down the street, chatting and smiling like she didn't have a care in the world. My blood boiled as I watched them stop at a little boutique, where she looped her arm through his like they were on some kind of date. Eventually, they walked back to her car. He said something and she laughed. A real, carefree laugh I hadn't heard from her in years. She got into her car and drove off, leaving him standing there with a smug look on his face. I followed her home, my mind racing. She got in a few minutes before I did, already changed into her loungewear by the time I walked through the door. "Hey, babe," she said, her voice light. "How was your day?" I stared at her for a moment, trying to keep my expression neutral. "Same old. You?" "Oh, the usual grind," she replied, not missing a beat. "I'm beat. Think I'm just gonna order some takeout tonight." She didn't even flinch. If guilt was eating at her, she hid it well. I went along with it, acting like nothing was wrong. But that night, as I lay next to her, I couldn't stop replaying what I'd seen. The cafe, the guy, her laugh. I didn't know who he was yet, but I was going to find out. I spent the next few days playing the part of the oblivious husband, all while digging for clues whenever I had the chance. Lucy wasn't exactly careless, but she wasn't as careful as she thought, either. Her phone was the first place I looked, but she'd gotten smarter. No saved messages, no suspicious calls in her log. If she was communicating with him, it wasn't happening on the apps I could see. What I did find was a recurring charge on her bank statement, $14.87 at the same cafe every Tuesday and Friday. It matched the days her step count spiked. And, coincidentally, the same day she conveniently had project deadlines that kept her from being home until late. I also noticed she'd started locking her phone more often, something she'd never bothered to do before. Small things, but they added up. The breaking point came one Thursday night. Lucy was in the shower again, and I was scrolling through her Instagram account. Not the public one she used to share curated pictures of vacations and brunch, but a private one I'd stumbled on a few months back. It wasn't hidden exactly. She'd even friend me on it. Her most recent post? A picture of a book, captioned, "A little escape during my lunch break. Hashtag cozy corners, hashtag me time." The location tag? The cafe. The book was staged on the same table I'd seen her and the guy sitting at. My stomach churned. She wasn't even trying to cover her tracks anymore. I saved the post and tucked my phone away just as she came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel and humming some pop song under her breath. I forced a smile. "You seem happy." She shrugged, toweling her hair. "Yoga's been great for my mood. You should try it sometime." "Maybe," I said, though my voice sounded distant even to me. She didn't notice. She never did, too busy scrolling through her phone or flipping through whatever overpriced self-help book was on her nightstand that week. That night, while she was asleep, I made up my mind. The next morning, I called in sick and parked a few blocks away from the cafe just before noon. Sure enough, Lucy's car pulled up a few minutes later. She went inside, and 10 minutes later, the guy arrived. This time, instead of staying put, I followed them. They didn't stick around the cafe. After grabbing their coffee, they walked down the street, chatting like old friends, or more than that. I trailed them as they rounded a corner and stopped in front of a small, nondescript house. He unlocked the door, holding it open for her with a flourish, and she stepped inside without hesitation. I couldn't breathe. The guy disappeared inside, the door clicking shut behind him. I stood there, frozen on the sidewalk, my brain struggling to process what I'd just seen. Lucy, my wife, had just walked into some random guy's house in the middle of a workday. I snapped a picture of the house and the street sign for good measure. Then, I got back in my car and drove home, the image of that door slamming in my face playing over and over in my head. When Lucy came home that night, she didn't even look at me. She tossed her bag on the counter, grabbed a LaCroix from the fridge, and headed straight to the couch. "Long day?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Ugh, yeah," she groaned. "Back-to-back meetings. I'm so ready for the weekend." Her lies were so casual, so practiced, that I almost believed her. But I'd seen the truth, and I wasn't going to let it go. The next morning, I went back to the house. I had no plan, just a gut-deep need to know who the hell this guy was and what was going on behind that door. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of place where people kept their lawns neat and waved at strangers but didn't ask questions. I parked a block away and waited. Around noon, the front door opened. Lucy walked out first, laughing at something the guy said. He followed, locking the door behind them. They looked so comfortable together, like they were rehearsing for some twisted rom-com. I didn't tail them this time. Instead, I walked up to the house once they were gone and rang the doorbell. No one answered, no surprise there. But there was a nameplate on the mailbox, Cole Whitaker. I took a picture and went back to my car. That name stuck in my head all day, looping like a bad song. It wasn't familiar, but it felt important. Back home, I did what anyone with half a brain and an internet connection would do. I Googled him. Turns out, Cole Whitaker wasn't just some random guy. He was Lucy's ex-boyfriend. His name popped up in old Facebook posts and tagged photos from years ago, back before Lucy and I got serious. I recognized him immediately. Same dark hair, same smug grin. Back then, she told me they'd broken up on bad terms and hadn't spoken since. Apparently, that was another lie. By the time Lucy came home that evening, I had a storm brewing in my chest. I wanted to scream at her, demand answers, show her the pictures, the receipts, the whole 9 yards. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I played it cool. How was work? I asked, sitting at the kitchen counter like I wasn't on the verge of snapping. She opened the fridge, pulling out leftovers. Busy. Glad it's the weekend. You? Same, I said, watching her carefully. She didn't even blink. The rest of the evening passed uneventfully, but I was already planning my next move. On Saturday morning, Lucy left early for her yoga class. As soon as she was gone, I grabbed my keys and headed back to Cole's house. This time, I didn't wait. I marched up to the front door and knocked hard. The man himself answered, looking startled. Up close, he seemed taller than I'd expected, with a cocky air that set my teeth on edge. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone polite but wary. "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I'm James, Lucy's husband." His face shifted, a flicker of recognition flashing across it before he masked it with a neutral expression. "Oh, nice to meet you." "Is it?" I asked, tilting my head, because I've got a pretty good idea of what's been going on here. He hesitated, then stepped outside, closing the door behind him. "Look, man, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Don't," I interrupted, my voice sharp. "I've seen the pictures. I know who you are. And I know Lucy's been spending her lunch breaks here. So don't insult me by playing dumb." Cole ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" I asked, crossing my arms. For a moment, he just stared at me, like he was weighing his options. Finally, he sighed. "Lucy and we've been reconnecting. As friends." I laughed, the sound bitter. "Friends? Is that what we're calling it now?" "She said you wouldn't understand," he said quietly. My blood boiled. "Oh, I understand just fine. You're screwing around with my wife behind my back. That about sum it up?" Cole didn't answer, which was answer enough. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "I'm going to make this very clear. You stay the hell away from Lucy, or things are going to get messy. Got it?" He nodded, his confidence visibly shaken. "Got it." I didn't wait for him to say anything else. I turned and walked back to my car, my heart pounding. The confrontation felt good in the moment, but I knew it wasn't enough. Cole might back off, but Lucy? She wasn't going to come clean unless I forced her hand. And that was exactly what I planned to do. I'd spent days preparing for this moment. Every lie, every excuse Lucy had thrown at me replayed in my head, sharpening my resolve. The pictures, the bank statements, her social media posts. It was all laid out, like ammunition ready to fire. That night, after dinner, I decided to pull the trigger. Lucy was on the couch, scrolling through her phone with a glass of wine in hand. She looked so normal, so innocent. It was almost enough to make me doubt myself. Almost. Hey, I said, sitting across from her. She glanced up, distracted. We need to talk. Her eyebrows lifted, and she set her phone down, tilting her head like I just told her something mildly surprising. Okay, what about? I took a deep breath. About where you've been spending your lunches, and who you've been spending them with. For a split second, something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe panic, but she covered it quickly with a laugh. What are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about, Lucy. The cafe. Cole. The house. Don't play dumb. Her smile faltered. You're being ridiculous. Cole's just an old friend. An old friend? I echoed, my voice rising. You expect me to believe that? I've seen the pictures. I've been to the house. I talked to him. That got her attention. Her face went pale, and she set her wine glass down with a sharp clink. You what? You heard me. I went to his house, Lucy. I saw you walk in like you owned the place. I talked to him, and guess what? He didn't even bother denying it. She stared at me, her jaw tightening. So you've been spying on me? Following me around like some kind of stalker? That's insane, James. Insane? I barked, standing up. You've been sneaking around behind my back for weeks, lying to me, humiliating me, and I'm the crazy one? Lucy stood too, her voice sharpening. I wasn't sneaking around. Cole and I have been catching up, that's all. We used to be close, and I didn't think you'd understand, so I didn't tell you. Sue me for wanting a little privacy. Privacy? I shot back. You're married, Lucy. Privacy doesn't mean lying to your husband and playing house with your ex-boyfriend. She crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. You're blowing this way out of proportion. I never slept with him. We're just friends. God, you're so paranoid. The words stung, but I didn't let them distract me. Then explain the long walks, the lunches, the house. Explain why you didn't tell me he was back in your life. And explain the way you laughed with him like I don't even exist. Her mouth opened, then closed. She was scrambling, searching for something, anything, that would make her look less guilty. Finally, she said, I needed someone to talk to. Someone who doesn't make me feel suffocated all the time. The room went silent. Suffocated. I repeated, my voice cold. That's what this is about. You were suffocated. So you ran to your ex instead of talking to me? She looked away, her arms still crossed tightly. I didn't mean for it to get out of hand. I felt trapped. Okay? And Cole was there. Trapped? I shook my head, laughing bitterly. You're unbelievable. I've done everything I can to support you, to build a life with you, and this is how you thank me. Her expression hardened. Maybe if you weren't so controlling, I wouldn't have felt the need to go to him in the first place. That was it. The final nail in the coffin. You know what, Lucy? I said, my voice low and steady. You can spin this however you want, but we both know the truth. You betrayed me, and I'm done. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw a crack in her composure. Done? What are you saying? I'm saying this marriage is over. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm not wasting another second on your lies. She stepped closer, her voice desperate now. James, wait. Don't do this. We can fix this. I'll stop seeing Cole. I'll go to therapy. Whatever you want. Just don't throw everything away. I stared at her, the woman I'd loved, the woman I thought I knew. And for the first time, I felt nothing but cold detachment. You already threw it away, I said quietly. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her standing there in stunned silence. Lucy didn't leave me alone that night. She knocked on the door of the guest room, where I'd gone to cool off, pleading through the door like she thought she could just talk me out of the inevitable. James, please, she said for the fourth time that night. Her voice cracked, a mix of desperation and frustration. You're overreacting. You're letting your jealousy ruin everything. I ignored her, scrolling through my phone as if she weren't even there. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of engaging in another round of her manipulative gymnastics. Finally, her voice dropped to a low hiss, anger replacing the pleading tone. You're going to regret this, James, she snapped before stomping away. Good. Let her be mad. She didn't scare me anymore. The next morning, I made my first move. I packed a bag, grabbed my laptop, and left the house before she woke up. I needed space to think, to plan my next steps without her hovering over me like a storm cloud. I checked into a cheap motel on the edge of town and started making calls. First, my lawyer. I'd been referred to Ashley West, a sharp, no-nonsense divorce attorney, by a friend who'd been through something similar. After a brief conversation, she laid out the basics: gathering evidence, locking down finances, and making sure Lucy couldn't twist the narrative to her advantage. "Do you have any proof of her infidelity?" Ashley asked, her tone professional but pointed. "I do," I replied, pulling up the photos I'd taken of Lucy and Cole at the cafe, along with a shot of the house and the nameplate on the mailbox. Pictures, location tags, timestamps. I even talked to him. He didn't deny it. "Good," she said. "The more we have, the better. If you can find anything else, texts, emails, anything concrete, send it my way. I'll start drafting the paperwork." Hanging up the phone, I felt a grim sense of determination. Lucy had made her choices. Now it was my turn. But the fallout wasn't limited to just the two of us. By midweek, word of our split had started to spread among our friends and family. I didn't tell anyone directly, but I wasn't exactly subtle about moving out or changing my relationship status on social media. That's when the calls and messages started rolling in. "James, what's going on?" my sister, Caitlin, demanded. "You and Lucy seemed fine at Mom's birthday party last month." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "She's been cheating on me, Kate. With her ex." There was a pause, and then her voice turned sharp. "What? Are you serious?" "That bitch." Hearing her call Lucy, that felt oddly validating. "Dead serious," I said. "It's been going on for weeks, maybe months. I'm done." "Good," Caitlin said fiercely. "You deserve so much better than that lying snake." The support from my sister and a few close friends was a lifeline. But not everyone took my side. Lucy, unsurprisingly, started spinning her own version of events. According to her, I was controlling, jealous, and paranoid. A husband who suffocated her so much she had no choice but to seek comfort elsewhere. She conveniently left out the parts where she lied, cheated, and gaslit me into thinking I was crazy. A few mutual friends bought her sob story, sending me messages urging me to work it out or forgive her mistakes. I ignored them. The worst came from her best friend, Megan, who texted me a wall of self-righteous nonsense about how I never appreciated Lucy and drove her into Cole's arms. I blocked her immediately. Through all of it, Lucy kept trying to contact me. She sent long, rambling texts about how she didn't mean for it to go this far and how she was willing to do whatever it takes to fix things. She even promised to cut Cole out of her life completely, but I wasn't buying it. If she'd been willing to fix things, she would have done it before sneaking around behind my back. The final straw came when she showed up at my motel. I'd been out grabbing groceries and came back to find her car parked in the lot. She was sitting on the hood, arms crossed and face set in that "don't you dare ignore me" expression I'd seen 100 times before. "James," she said as I approached, her voice soft but insistent. "Can we talk?" "About what?" I asked flatly. She blinked, like she wasn't expecting me to be so cold. "About us. About fixing this. I know I made mistakes, but—" "Mistakes?" I cut her off, my voice rising. "You call lying, cheating, and sneaking around with your ex a mistake? That wasn't a mistake, Lucy. That was a choice. And now you get to live with it." She flinched but recovered quickly, stepping closer. "Please, James. We've been together for 6 years. Don't throw that away." "You threw it away the second you walked into his house," I said, unlocking my door. "We're done." She stared at me, her expression twisting into something I couldn't quite place. Hurt, anger, maybe desperation. "You're going to regret this," she said quietly. "Maybe," I replied, stepping inside. "But I doubt it." I closed the door in her face, locking it before she could say another word. As I leaned against the door, my chest heaving, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: clarity. This wasn't just about her betrayal anymore. It was about reclaiming my life, and I wasn't going to let her drag me down any longer. Lucy didn't take the hint. Over the next week, She ramped up her attempts to fix things, or maybe to save face, depending on how you looked at it. She called me every day, leaving voicemails that bounced between tearful apologies and icy accusations. She texted long paragraphs about how she was willing to change, and even sent pictures of old mementos from our relationship, like she thought nostalgia might do the trick. None of it worked. I didn't block her, though. Not yet. Ashley, my lawyer, had advised me to keep a record of her communication in case things got messy later. And boy, was Lucy giving me plenty to work with. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon. I'd been at work, trying to focus on a client meeting, when my phone buzzed with a text from Caitlin. Caitlin, Lucy's here. She just showed up at my house, freaking out. What the hell is going on? I excused myself from the meeting and called her immediately. She's what? I asked as soon as Caitlin picked up. She just barged in, Caitlin said, her voice tight with anger. Started crying about how you're filing for divorce and how it's all some big misunderstanding. I told her to leave, but she's refusing. I pinched the bridge of my nose, trying to stay calm. I'm sorry, Kate. I didn't think she'd drag you into this. Well, she did, Caitlin snapped. What do you want me to do? Give her 5 minutes to explain herself, I said reluctantly. Then tell her to leave. If she doesn't, call the police. There was a pause, and then Caitlin sighed. All right, but you owe me for this, James. Trust me, I know, I muttered before hanging up. When I got off work, I checked my phone and saw another text from Caitlin. Caitlin, she finally left, but not before blaming me for ruining her marriage. She's unhinged, James. You need to be careful. I stared at the message, the weight of everything sinking in. Lucy wasn't just desperate. She was spiraling. That night, I sent her a text of my own. Lucy, stop. Stop showing up at my family's houses. Stop calling and texting. This isn't going to work. I've made my decision, and nothing you say or do will change that. If you keep harassing me or anyone I know, I'll get a restraining order. Her response came almost immediately. Lucy, harassing you? After everything I've done for us, you're treating me like I'm the bad guy? I'm trying to fix this, James. You're the one throwing it all away. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The next morning, I called Ashley and told her what had happened. She's getting desperate, I said, showing up at my sister's house, sending these crazy texts. I don't know what her endgame is, but it's exhausting. Ashley didn't sound surprised. That's typical in cases like this, she said. When they realize they've lost control, they double down. Keep documenting everything. And if she escalates, we'll take action. That same day, I moved out of the motel and into a short-term rental closer to work. It was small, just a one-bedroom apartment with outdated appliances and peeling paint, but it was mine. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. Lucy, of course, found out about the move almost immediately, probably through mutual friends, though I couldn't be sure. She texted me that evening. Lucy, so you're really gone, huh? You think running away solves anything? I stared at the message for a long moment before deleting it. She wasn't my problem anymore. The idea of revenge wasn't something I'd actively planned. At first, all I wanted was to move on with my life, to untangle myself from Lucy's lies and manipulation. But then, her constant attempts to paint me as the villain made it clear. Lucy wasn't just going to let me walk away. If she wanted a fight, I'd give her one. First, I compiled everything. The pictures of her and Cole at the cafe, the shots of her entering his house, and the screenshots of her frantic texts. I even recorded some of her voicemails, rambling, angry tirades that ranged from pleading to outright blaming me for her infidelity. Then, I started talking. I didn't blast everything all at once. That would have been too obvious, too easy to dismiss as a bitter ex trying to smear her name. Instead, I carefully let the truth slip out to a few key people. Close friends, mutual acquaintances, the ones who mattered in our social circles. I didn't want to bring this up, I'd say, showing them the evidence on my phone. But Lucy's been telling people I'm the bad guy here, and I can't let that stand. The responses were overwhelmingly supportive. Oh my God, James, one friend said, scrolling through the photos with a horrified expression. She told us you were being paranoid. I can't believe this. Another shook his head, muttering, I always thought Lucy was a little too self-serving. But this? Wow. The fallout was swift. Lucy's carefully curated narrative began to unravel as people started connecting the dots. Her tearful pleas for sympathy were met with cold skepticism, and the friends who'd initially rallied around her began distancing themselves. Even Megan, her die-hard best friend, eventually messaged me. Megan, I owe you an apology. Lucy lied to me about what happened. I don't agree with what you're doing, but I get it now. I didn't reply. Megan's apology wasn't worth much to me, but the fact that even she was backing off said everything I needed to know. Meanwhile, Cole wasn't faring much better. Word of his involvement spread quickly, and his smug, carefree persona took a serious hit. People started whispering about how he'd knowingly gotten involved with a married woman, and his reputation, whatever it was worth, began to crumble. According to Olivia, a mutual friend who'd stayed in touch, Cole had been trying to backpedal ever since the divorce papers were filed. He's acting like he didn't know she was married, she told me over the phone, her voice dripping with disbelief. Like, seriously? The guy's a walking red flag. I couldn't help but laugh. He's welcome to her, I said. They deserve each other. But revenge wasn't the only thing on my mind. In the midst of all this chaos, I started focusing on myself again. The short-term rental became my sanctuary, a place where I could rebuild without the shadow of Lucy looming over me. I went to the gym every morning, threw myself into my work, and even started reconnecting with old hobbies I'd let fall by the wayside. One evening, I found myself sitting on the couch, flipping through a stack of dusty vinyl records I hadn't touched in years. Music had always been my escape, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like I could breathe again. Lucy's text slowed, then stopped altogether. Whether it was because she'd finally accepted that I wasn't coming back, or because she'd moved on to her next target, I didn't care. I was free. Lucy might have stopped texting me, but her silence didn't mean she was done causing trouble. A week after moving into my rental, I got an email from my lawyer, Ashley. She wanted to schedule a meeting to discuss new developments in the divorce proceedings. I didn't need a crystal ball to guess that Lucy was behind it. At Ashley's office, she handed me a stack of papers. Lucy's filed a counterclaim, she said, her voice calm but clipped. A counterclaim? I repeated, flipping through the documents. For what? She's alleging emotional abuse, Ashley said bluntly. She's claiming that you were controlling, manipulative, and that your behavior pushed her into the affair. She's asking for spousal support and a larger share of your marital assets. I blinked at her, my mind struggling to catch up. She's what? Ashley leaned back in her chair, her expression steely. This isn't uncommon. She's trying to shift the blame and come out ahead financially. It's a tactic, James. We'll fight it, but I need you to understand that this could get ugly. I sat back, running a hand over my face. Do you think she has a chance? With the evidence you've provided? Ashley shook her head. Not a strong one. But that doesn't mean she won't try to drag this out as long as possible. The next few weeks were a blur of depositions, filings, and more meetings with Ashley. Lucy's claims were as flimsy as they were infuriating, vague anecdotes about feeling isolated and walking on eggshells, none of which held up under scrutiny. Ashley picked her apart piece by piece, using my meticulously documented evidence to counter every baseless accusation. She's making herself look worse with every filing, Ashley said after one particularly damning hearing. Judges don't like it when people waste their time with petty claims. Still, the process was exhausting. Every time I thought we were nearing the finish line, Lucy threw another wrench into the works, delaying hearings, requesting additional documents, even trying to dispute the photos I'd taken of her and Cole. She's stalling, Ashley said during one of our calls. She's hoping you'll get frustrated and offer her a settlement just to make it stop. But I wasn't giving in. For months, I stayed the course, showing up to every meeting, every hearing, refusing to let Lucy's games get the better of me. Slowly but surely, her case fell apart. By the time we reached the final hearing, she looked worn down, her once polished confidence nowhere to be seen. The judge ruled in my favor. Lucy got nothing. No spousal support, no extra assets, nothing beyond what she brought into the marriage. Meanwhile, I walked away with my dignity intact and the satisfaction of knowing I'd fought for what was right. When the ruling was announced, Lucy shot me one last look across the courtroom, a mix of anger, bitterness, and something that almost looked like regret. But it was too late for that. The moment the judge finalized the divorce, it felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Lucy had tried every trick in the book: manipulation, lies, stalling. But in the end, her games had backfired. The drive home from the courthouse was quiet. No music, no calls, just the hum of the road and the steady thrum of my thoughts. For the first time in months, I wasn't consumed by anger or anxiety. I felt free. When I walked into my apartment, I looked around at the small space that had become my sanctuary. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The emptiness felt less like loneliness and more like opportunity, a blank slate to rebuild my life. The fallout from the divorce spread quickly. Friends who had initially bought into Lucy's narrative began reaching out, apologizing for doubting me or offering their support. It felt good to hear, but I didn't linger on it. I wasn't looking for validation from anyone anymore. Lucy, from what I heard through the grapevine, wasn't faring as well. Her attempts to spin the divorce as a mutual misunderstanding fell flat when people learned about Cole. And while she didn't lose her job, her social circle had all but evaporated. Even Megan, her staunchest defender, eventually distanced herself. As for Cole, he vanished from the picture almost as soon as the divorce was finalized. Whether he bailed or Lucy dumped him, I didn't care. They were both relics of a chapter one was happy to close. In the months that followed, I threw myself into rebuilding. I started taking better care of myself, not just physically, but mentally. Therapy became a weekly ritual, a space where I could untangle the mess of emotions Lucy had left behind. "You've been through a lot," my therapist, Dr. Harper, said during one session. "It's okay to grieve the life you thought you had, but don't forget to celebrate the life you're building now." And I was building something new. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years, joined a local hiking group, and even started dabbling in photography, a hobby I'd abandoned long ago. Slowly, the pieces of my life began to fall into place. The biggest shift came 6 months after the divorce. I was sitting in a park, camera in hand, capturing the way the sunlight filtered through the trees. It was one of those rare moments where everything felt still, like the world had finally stopped spinning long enough for me to catch my breath. That's when Olivia called. "I'm proud of you, James," she said after we chatted for a bit. "You didn't just survive all this, you came out stronger." I smiled, staring at the image on my camera screen. It was a photo of a bird in mid-flight. "Thanks." That. Lucy. And now, I was. Epilogue. A year later, I found myself on a new trail, this time in the mountains, surrounded by towering pines and crisp, clean air. The past felt like a distant memory, something that no longer defined me. I had a new job I loved, a circle of friends I could rely on, and a sense of peace I had. As I stood at the edge of a rocky overlook, the valley stretching out below me, I took a deep breath and smiled. The pain was gone. The anger, too. All that remained was clarity and hope. For anyone reading this, wondering if they'll ever get through something similar, here's what I've learned. You're stronger than you think. The things people do to you don't define you. It's how you rise after the fall that counts. Keep going. You'll find your freedom, too. Subscribe so you don't miss new stories on the channel.